Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? Adjman sent a drop coming to you guys here today with another deck tech. So today we're going to be taking a look at a standard build, and it is Jund Midrange. So for you guys that are unfamiliar with the term Jund, it's a color combination of red, black, and green. So with this deck, it's going to be a deck that I'm running for the beginning of the Gatecrash season of Standard. So we're going to take a look at how this deck looks, and we're going to kind of look at the changes that were made to it from what I was running in the Return to Ravnica season of Standard, where at the beginning of the season, it was a really popular deck. I actually had the deck proxied before Return to Ravnica even came out, and it was the first deck that I ran into the Return to Ravnica season of Standard, and I played it all the way up until probably like halfway through the season. Then I just started working with some other decks and weaning myself off of running it. Even though I really liked it, I ran a whole lot of other decks, but new season of Standard, Gatecrash is out now, so we're going to take a look at some of the new things that are added here. There's not a whole lot that's actually added to the deck. It's mainly just things being changed around and some new dual lands with Stomping Grounds. But either way, we're going to take a look at this deck. But before we get to that, if you guys have any suggestions for decks that you would like to see, please leave them down in the comments below, and I'll take them into consideration for future deck techs. Now, jumping on into this deck and not wasting any more time, we have our land base, so we have 25 lands, which is pretty spot on with what I had running before. I think the lowest I was ever running in the deck was probably like 24. I think 23 at one point, but 25 is just a solid number. It is a mid-range build with some high-end drops, so we want to have a fair bit of lands for us. So we have our Overgrown Tombs, and we're running a playset of Overgrown Tombs. It's very dual land heavy, so playset of Tombs. We have a playset of Stomping Grounds for red and green, and this was actually substituting the Cavern of Souls that I was running last season. As the season progressed, I didn't initially start off with Cavern of Souls, but as control decks started becoming more popular, I started running Caverns, and because control isn't a huge force, aggro is much more common to see in the meta. Stomping Grounds is going to be in there until there's like a reason to start running the Caverns, and then Stomping Grounds is probably going to switch into using the Caverns, just because Stomping Grounds isn't necessary, but it definitely helps with the mana base and running triple green cards like Garruk Primal Hunter. Then we have Blood Crypts, so I'm only running 3 Blood Crypts here. Then we have our other dual lands, so we have a playset of Woodland Cemeteries, playset of Dragonskull Summits. We also have a playset of Rootbound Crags. And then we have our 2 utility lands. We have our 2 Kessig Wolf Runs here. So again, this is like a pretty big and standard card as far as running Jund goes. And again, it was a card that I ran last season. But it still does the job. You get to put in X amount of mana, and you're paying 1 red and 1 green. Aside from that, giving a creature plus X plus 0 until the end of the turn, and trample as well. So you get the trample over with damage, and it's a really good win condition for the deck. Even if you have something small, you can just throw in a whole lot of mana into it and make it really huge and win off of that. So now we're going to take a look at essentially everything else in the deck. So starting off with creatures, we have Vampire Nighthawk. So this is a card that I initially started out with at the beginning of Return to Ravnica. Then I kind of moved away from using it, but now I'm running it again. So I have 3 Vampire Nighthawks for the deck, 2 3 for 3 with Flying Death Touch and Lifelink. It's a good card for being able to block things that your opponent's doing, but aside from being able to block and just kill bigger things, it also has Lifelink, which is going to counteract any shocklands that you have coming in untapped, any other life loss that you may take from other aggro-based decks and things of that nature. But he is like a removal element of his own just because of that Death Touch, and he's really good for it. So 3 Vampire Nighthawks. We also have some Huntmasters here, so playset of Huntmaster, which is exactly the same and is pretty standard amongst any Jund build. So 2/2 for 4, you get another 2/2 whenever he enters the battlefield or whenever he flips the Huntmaster of the Fells, and you gain 2 life. If he flips over onto his other side, he's a 4/4, deals 2 damage to target creature, and target creature an opponent controls and that opponent. So not bad overall. He's a really good creature. We have Olivia Voldaren, so this is a 2 of in the deck. So 3/3 for 4 with flying. Her first ability is for 2 mana, where she gets to deal 1 damage to target creature. It becomes a vampire in addition to all of its other creature types, and you put a +1/+1 counter on Olivia, so you get to make her really big really quick. And the fact that she has flying is really good evasion. She can either block other things that need to be blocked, or she can just bash in for a whole lot of damage. But her second ability is for 5 mana, gain control of target vampire for as long as you control Olivia Voldaren, which is really, really tremendous. So for that 5 mana, you're able to essentially be able to take whatever creature you want of your opponents if you already pinged it. So with 7 mana open, double black and 1 red, you can just outright just take something of your opponents, which is pretty awesome. So to Olivia Voldaren, she's really strong still. Thragtusk, as you guys could imagine, it's a pretty standard card as far as like running green goes. So 5/3 for 5, enters the battlefield and we gain 5 life. Leaves the battlefield, we get a 3/3. Again, it's a really run-of-the-mill card for green, and he just gets the job done. You want to gain some life. You want to stay in the game as far as running against aggro goes. We have Thundermaw Hellkite, which was a card that didn't really make the cut as far as the early meta went for the Return to Ravnica season. But as it progressed, people started realizing how good Thundermaw Hellkite really was, and people just started picking them up. And the Hellkite's price just started skyrocketing. But he's a 5/5 for 5 flying. Haste, enters the battlefield, and he pings down your opponent's creatures, deals 1 damage to them, and taps them. So you kind of assure yourself of being able to swing in with them. But ultimately, 5/5 for 5 with haste and flying is really nice, and it puts you in a really good position to be able to win the game from that point. Then we have our Planeswalkers. So we have Liliana of the Veil, and we have 3 of them. Towards the middle of the season, I didn't run her as far as Return to Ravnica goes. I didn't run her just because she ended up being kind of clunky and a little bit slow. Even though the meta is still pretty fast for the early Gatecrash season now, she's still really good because she lets you... she makes players discard cards, which is useful because oftentimes we're just going to be discarding lands that we don't need. -2 forces target player to sacrifice a creature, which is very, very useful in just being able to thwart any aggro type decks. And the -6 lets you separate your opponent's permanents into 2 piles. They get to keep one, and the other one is going to be sacrificed, which is... it's not bad, but mainly the biggest things are going to be to throw your opponent off their game by making them discard things, which it's a setback for you, but it's more of a setback for your opponent. If you're already getting rid of their creatures, being able to remove any elements they have in their hand that they could use towards putting them at an advantage in the board state, being able to get rid of those is exactly what you want to do. You want to have ways to make your opponent discard things. So I like Liliana for that, and also being able to force your opponent to sack things. So it gets around indestructible with like Boros Charm and annoying things like that at a sorcery speed. So it's always nice to have Liliana as that kind of end all, oh, you have to sack your dude kind of effect. Then we have Garruk Primal Hunter. So Primal Hunter is a 3 loyalty, 5 cost planeswalker, triple green intensive, but with all the fixing that we have, especially like with Farseek and all the duels, it shouldn't be bad to be able to cast him for that triple green. His +1 creates 3 3s, which is perfect for being able to either swing in or have blockers for your opponent's things, and just make it so that aggro really can't do anything without trading. And -3, we get to draw cards equal to the greatest power amongst creatures we control. So oftentimes it'll be 5 off of like Thragtusk, Thundermaw, or Olivia if she has like 1 or 2 counters off of her. 2 if we're going for like drawing 5. But those are the 3 typical things that I'm going to be drawing off of. If I'm really desperate, I'll draw off of like Huntmaster or Vampire Nighthawk. Sometimes I'll even use Kessig Wolf Run to pump one of my creatures to be able to draw and dig more with Garruk into removal or other things. But Garruk's ultimately good with his -3 and +1 to be able to use those as a utility for yourself. Then we're working our way into the non-planeswalker, non-creature spells. So we have our Farseeks to let us search for our Shocklands. So we have a playset of Farseek. We have our removal package here, so we have our Searing Spears. So I'm running 3 Searing Spears to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. It's a really good early game element of removal for small creatures with all the aggro that's going around. So 3 Searing Spears for us here. Then we have Mizzium Mortars. So I'm running 2 Mizzium Mortars in the deck because the overload cost is really nice up against a lot of small creatures. Dealing 4 damage to each creature we don't control is pretty perfect. And especially if you like start your opening hand with it, it's nice, and it sets you with a bigger advantage because Bonfire of the Damned sometimes gets clunky and awkward when you don't get to hardcast it for whatever you need it for. But having Mizzium Mortars as a sorcery speed removal for the 2 mana or just a overall board wipe for 6 mana is pretty perfect, especially because we're already ramping with Farseek and we have enough things that we can play up until we get to our 6th land drop. So the Mortars ends up being a good like turn 5, turn 6 type of card where we can just Wrath for a decent bit and get rid of a fair amount of creatures that our opponents have as far as aggro goes. So 2 Mizzium Mortars. And then we have 1 Abrupt Decay, so this is more so geared towards the aggro-based decks as well as being able to get rid of Detention Spheres and Oblivion Rings if our opponent's running them. But Abrupt Decay deals with anything with 3 converted mana cost or less, and it's uncounterable, so it assures us that we have a element that's a little bit more specific than the other removal elements we have. But if it doesn't end up working for us, if it's completely useless, that's why we can side it out. We can just side it out for something that's more appropriate in the sideboard. So 1 Abrupt Decay in the main board. I also have 1 more in the sideboard, but I've liked running 1 just as a 1-of in the main board thus far. Then we have our ultimate price here. So destroy target monocolored creature for 2 mana, and we have 3 of them in the main board. So there are a lot of things that it can hit into. There's a lot of monocolored, really powerful creatures and staples that are being used. So Ultimate Price can just hit into them, and we don't really have to worry about things that are going to be annoying, like Hellrider, Thundermaw Hellkite, Angel of Glory's Rise if it's trying to go off into the combo. We can also deal with Angel of Serenity, and just there's a whole lot of things that Ultimate Price can deal with, and we want to have Ultimate Price there to be able to deal with them at an instant speed for 2 mana. It's really good value to have it in here. And then we have Rakdos' return. So this was a card that I initially kind of undervalued, but as I started playing Jund Midrange more, it ended up being a whole lot better than I think a lot of people expected this card to be, just because everybody was looking at it and they're like, all right, well, it's underwhelming because it's not as good as Blightning, but it ended up being pretty good because once you get into that late game stage, it ends up being pretty good when you're able to have X be like 4 or 5 and get rid of all the cards that your opponent has in their hand. So I like Rakdos' return. It forces your opponent to discard cards and lose some life or deals X amount of damage to them, so you can redirect it at a Planeswalker if you choose to. But Rakdos' return is nice because up against anything that's like not aggro, usually against aggro I end up siding them out because it's a little bit too slow of a card and it doesn't really net you a whole lot of advantage. But Rakdos' return is good against the slower decks, more mid-range control-based decks, and anything that doesn't have a win condition of like beating you on turn 4, anything like that. We just want to side Rakdos' return out, but against anything that's a little bit slower, you get value out of running it in the main board. But anything else, just side it out, and you really don't have a problem with it. So that's the main board that we have here. Now let's take a look at what we have for the sideboard here. So the first thing was Barter in Blood. Now Barter in Blood was a card that I was actually running Tribute to Hunger instead of, just because I didn't think that the Barter in Blood was necessary. But with the enormous amount of aggro that's in the meta, and especially with things that are annoying like Boros Charm, where at a whim your opponent's able to make their permanents indestructible and you just have that awkward moment where your removal just isn't good enough. Barter in Blood gets around that because it forces your opponent to sack creatures, which is pretty good. Especially playing it like turn 3 if you're able to Farseek, get another land, hit a land drop on your 3rd turn and play Barter and get rid of some early aggro elements. It really buys you a couple of turns, but Barter in Blood is pretty nice because if we're siding it in, we're going to be playing the deck a little bit more defensively, and we're not going to be throwing out like all of our dudes and then playing Barter so we sack our own things. But it's nice because it's a massive way to make your opponent sack, and it gets around indestructible. So I liked it. I liked it a little bit more than Tribute to Hunger. So we're running 2 Barter in Blood. It also deals with those Delver decks pretty well because the Simic and the Bant Delver decks they're starting to catch up in popularity. So this was one of those cards that I was thinking like, all right, well, even if they do play like Delver and then play Geist of Saint Traft, I can still hit like a turn 3, turn 4 Barter and get rid of both of them. So 2 Barter and Blood. Then we have 1 Bonfire of the Damned. So this is a more widespread type of removal where we can hard cast it, but it's much more optimal to hit into the miracle cost. And even though we're running the Garruk to be able to draw off of his -3, we still get value out of having Bonfire in the sideboard whenever we need it to be able to just have another Wrath ability against a lot of smaller dudes. So 1 Bonfire in this side. Then we have our Pillar of Flame. So Pillar of Flame is a 3 of against really quick pace aggro decks, anything that likes to beat us down really quick and has a lot of X2 or less creatures like X2s, X1s. We can just get rid of them pretty easily with the Pillar of Flame. So 3 Pillar of Flame for that. Then we have the 1 Abrupt Decay that I mentioned before. 1 more in the sideboard for dealing with cards with converted mana cost 3 or less creatures. Anything like Detention Sphere, Oblivion Ring, like I mentioned before. So just 1 more of those to kind of give us an advantage against decks that are running a lot of things with a curve that is going to lead up to the 3rd converted mana cost with a whole lot of things being heavy in 1, 2, and 3. Then we have Duress. So 2 Duress up against the mid-range and the control matchups where we're able to look at our opponent's hand and we can choose a non-creature, non-land card from it and they have to discard it. So like Planeswalkers, any sort of instant sorceries, enchantments, things of that nature. So Duress is going to hit into those pretty effectively. Then we have Deathrite Shaman. So with Deathrite Shaman, it's going to be more so for Reanimator than I think anything else. Sometimes I'll set it in against control if I really need to be that aggressive with running Deathrite to get rid of their instants and sorceries. Not so much that it's, oh, I'm getting rid of their flashbacks, but it's just for the strategic portion of just being a little bit more aggressive. Even despite that, I find myself siding in Deathrite Shaman just for the bare essentials against any type of Reanimator builds, but sometimes I'll side it in against control as well. So the Deathrite Shaman is there for graveyard hate, but more so Reanimator than anything else, I would say. And then we have Slaughter Games as being the last 3 cards in the sideboard. So with Slaughter Games, it's a 4-cost card. It's a sorcery. It's Memoricide for you guys that remember Memoricide. It can't be countered by spells or abilities. We name a non-land card and search our opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that same name and exile them. And then that player shuffles his or her library. So with Slaughter Games, we name things like Unburial Rites whenever it comes to Reanimator decks, or like Angel of Glory's Rise if they're going for the human Reanimator. We name Angel of Glory's Rise and they really have no means of just trying to outrace us and win from that point. Against other decks, we can name like big things. If we're playing like a Jund Mirror, we can start going with Thragtusk. We get rid of Thragtusk so they don't really have a means of massive life gain. Then we can start naming other threats that they have, like the Primal Hunter, because we don't want our Primal Hunter to die, and we can make a ton of tokens. Thundermaw Hellkite's also somewhat annoying. It depends on what range of things you already have to deal with creatures. But ultimately, Slaughter Games just hits into any win conditions your opponents have. Just if you know well enough what your opponent's playing and you're able to kind of gauge what they're playing already as far as Planeswalkers win conditions go, you can Slaughter Games for anything that they have that can be a potential threat against you, and you don't have to deal with it for the entirety of the game. So that is the main board and sideboard for Jund Midrange. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. It's a update from the Return to Ravnica season and what I'm running for the Gatecrash season. The entire deck list is down below where you guys can check it out and use the deck list as a reference. There's also a playlist to all of the previous decks that I've actually covered on the channel, so you guys can check that out and check out any of the other decks that I've done in previous seasons or in this season as well. And yeah, so if you guys enjoyed it, please be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. And as always, thank you guys for watching and have a wonderful, fun-filled Magic the Gathering day.